Hey everyone, I'm Lou, and I'm about to discuss on why I think history is important and relevant in today's modern world. Now, when you think of something old, expired, past due, you tend to toss it out, throw it away, because it's old and, people are looking for a fresh new take on things, whether it be food or a lifestyle. But what if we could learn about certain aspects of life that happened millions of years ago that would help shape the way we go about our everyday lives today? I know what you're thinking, but if it already happened, what difference does it make? Well, that might be true, but as with most things, there's always another way of looking at it. History can influence, our time today. It's just, well, it goes without saying. Think about aged wine or antiques. Yes, they're old, but they have valuable qualities about them today. I feel like the more we open up with history and accept it and learn about it, because, I could see the conflict there. We weren't there. Sure, there were writers, very good philosophers and historians of the time, like Herodotus, and all the other, famous Greek and Roman and so on and so forth, writers of the time. They just, did it happen? Are they exaggerating what they wrote? We just don't know. We're going by these documents. However, as the world progresses, so does technology and modern science. And because of these things, yes, you can predict. You can go ahead and, get rid of false claims and, see what actually went down. It helps. And with a great combination of modern science and past techniques and try to make sense of it all, sometimes you get an answer. Sometimes it's not as clear, but with all these theories going around, you tend to, put the missing pieces of the puzzles together, and there you go. What I'm getting at here is history could teach us a lot about the world today. What went wrong, obviously, in past civilizations that made them crash and burn, could definitely shed some light on why we have problems today, and maybe shape our future into a better, more functional system, where there's less hate, and less crime, and, maybe more prosperity. What did they do that could still be used today that made them thrive? These are the questions and answers we should be asking and seeking. A lot of people tell me that history is written by the victor, and that's, 100% true. And that does influence probably what we see today, because if you win, you could totally direct your, former enemy's life, what they're about, and change their perspective on how we see it today. So how do we debunk that? Well, what about the people that were in conflict? What about the philosophers that all they wanted to do was just study and read and learn? What about their, pieces of work? Or do you assume that all of them were corrupt? Some were, some weren't. But these people are genuine. They have crafted an art, and they would rather use the pen than the sword. And that right there, I think, explains a lot about their work and, the truth behind their writings. So that leads me to believe that what these, philosophers and scientists, such as Plato or Archimedes, they weren't biased. And, I just don't see, any force hand that would make them, change their minds and try to, dilute history. Now, it's not to say some of these philosophers were influenced, about their culture, but I don't think that much pride would have, had a long-lasting effect on what they wrote, because it always can be compared of same individuals living in the year. So if you have two philosophers living in Greece and they're, writing side by side, I mean, they're not sharing notes or nothing, then you could always cross-reference each other. Did this event happen? Maybe one person tells it this way, another person did, and then that's how you could tell. But if you see similarities in a consistent basis of someone writing the same body of work about a particular event, then yeah, I mean, there has to be some truth there. One of these men, a great engineer actually from Syracuse, Archimedes, developed, I guess you could say, the first laser beam. Think of it as a big magnifying glass that could reflect the sun onto an incoming enemy vessel. Now, obviously, he did this to defend his city at the time, and did it work? Maybe, maybe not. You have to give credit to people in these, classical times that just could develop these monumental projects with so little. Whereas modern times, we invest all this money into resources to create, stealth fighters, invisible radar, and weapons of mass destruction, but always at a price or a cost, that could be effective or, destructive. That's something we could look at, maybe utilize in the future, working with very little resources and try to make the best out of it. Just think, the mental capacity, that people just, thought of these ideas. Well, I'm going to pack up my stuff, leave my homeland to travel somewhere else and record it. One of the greatest explorers, I think, Strabo, who left his homeland of what is now Turkey to reach as far as Africa, Rome, and some of his works, still survive today. Not that much, but a lot of reference material, and it's impressive how once again someone in classical times could get around as much as they did, using only what they got. I also think history could bring people together. It could probably blur the lines, maybe, on racism, hatred among fellow men and women, and maybe find a balance and equality for the human race. Now, not everything was peaches and cream. You know this. You just got to turn on the History Channel, and you'll know what I'm talking about. History, 50% of it is war. But it's usually a very little reason, political gain, or self-defense. One of them, I'm sure you could, come to the conclusion that, like I said, it wasn't all, a walk in the park to live in those times. But with all that aside, all the advancements that they made, especially Rome, especially Egypt, Mesopotamia, I could go on, these cultures developing over time and being pressured, into assimilating in other cultures and influencing them. See, sometimes it's the conquerors that get influenced by the people, that they've overtaken and try to corrupt, but it usually backfires. Egypt's a good example. Twice, actually. When the Greek Ptolemies, wind up taking the Egyptian kingdom for their own, they thought of themselves not as kings, but pharaohs. So yes, you had ethnic Greek Macedonians on the Egyptian throne, but a lot of native Egyptians were in the court. They practiced Egyptian rituals, and they even tried to combine Greek and Egyptian gods, one of them being Serapis. Another example, when the Romans conquered Egypt, the influence you could see, and today there's mummies of, Roman royalty and nobles that instead of being, burnt and their ashes spread, amongst the wind, they opted for being mummified, which was rare. You don't see, that many cultures outside where mummification actually existed being used by other tribes or other groups of people that saw this go down and said, hey, this looks like a great idea, and I'm going to do it. So that just goes to show you. Sometimes you find common ground amongst the chaos. What about diversity? Well, this one I'm going to go ahead and talk about Africa, actually. Because believe it or not, obviously, if you read a book or watch TV, Africa is diverse. It's just how it is. Not by just conquerors, but just geographically where it's located. For example, South Africa has a lot of, native Germans. This is, immigrants, from, the Kingdom of Prussia and, Germany, that just settled in these South African lands, developed a culture and native language of their own. On a side note, the Phoenicians from modern-day Lebanon settled on western Sicily along with their predecessors, the Carthaginians of today's Tunisia, establishing colonies on the Mediterranean island. They lived among and traded with the Greeks already entrenched on the island. This was followed by Romans, Byzantine Greeks, Moors, which is a generalized term for medieval Muslims of Berber and Arab descent, not a particular race, and Christianized Viking Normans of the north. Yes, all these groups and more set up shop on the shores of Sicily and southern Italy as well. So when we talk about cultural diversity, Southern Europe definitely had plenty of that to show. Even till this day, we see fragments of these past societies impacting the cuisine, people, and architecture of Southern Europe today. Same thing in Brazil. Brazil, there's a lot of Germans that immigrated after World War II and settled in, parts of South America, parts of South Africa, to, live their lives and not worried about, Allied and American forces hunting them down and killing them because they were Nazis. But like I said, not everyone was escaping hunting parties. People just, I guess, couldn't live in their home or in their home country anymore and decided to seek greater riches elsewhere. It's migration. It's what happens. Indo-Europeans from Asia Minor and Anatolia and the Caucasus eventually migrated to Greece, started civilizations there, and then migrated again to Italy. So you see, this was going around. There was a lot of continent hopping. I know it doesn't make any sense because of borders today and so much red tape and flying and how long it would take them to part A to part B. Well, they did it. They made it happen. And it's noted in many history books today. It's not taught in history classes, but these, migrations to different regions of the world all happened. So, if you took a DNA test today, I'm sure it would be, pretty much 50% of what you are with specks of your ancient ancestral genes floating around. In fact, that's what got me into the whole history thing. I took a DNA test and the results I expected, Southern European, no big whoop there, but, seeing Middle Eastern, North African, Greek influences, made me want to dig deeper, and hence my, ever-growing love for history. Now back to Africa, the cradle of civilization, as they say. Sure, the South, it's heavily influenced by, German expats and all that. But look at the North, another diverse thing. The North could be almost in comparison to the Middle East. Let's talk about the native people of North Africa, like the Berbers, for example. These were, pagan worshipping groups of people native to the deserts of North Africa and surroundings that, made a living just fine, cultivating what they can, and, building bridges and making alliances or enemies of, other conquerors and other tribes. And like I said, this group had their own language, their own type of culture that, as history went on and different, groups of people settled in these regions, they were influenced, but, they still held on to their identity till this day. You will still see in, the deserts of, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, etc., these, Berber people that are, centuries old, yet still carry their tradition. Yes, they speak Arabic. Yes, they practice Islam, but their history could go, way back. Even before that, it looked drastically different than what it did today. And just for the fact that there was Libyan, North African important people that thrived outside of there. Saint Augustine of Hippo, he was a North African Berber. Septimus Severus, a Roman emperor, one of the first African Roman emperors. You had Hannibal from Carthage, who almost brought Rome to their knees. Ptolemy of Mauritania, who was linked to the dynasty of Cleopatra. So yes, a place that you think is, a jungle, a vast wasteland of desert and wilderness. Nope. It's the basin of rich cultural history. And let's talk about the Middle East. Now, the Middle East also looked drastically different, especially parts of Persia and Syria. Persia being Iran, of course. The Persian Empire stretched everywhere, so you can imagine they brought whatever influences they got from other places back home. When the Greeks came, they went and named Syria after one of their kings, Antiochus, which was eventually called Antioch. Now, centuries further down the road, when Rome eventually took over and the Byzantines, Christianity flourished. Now, it was different forms of Christianity than you would see today. It wasn't Catholic. It was more of a orthodoxy, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing these words wrong. I didn't say I was a, grammar word expert. I'm just trying to, go along and explain things here. But anyways, like I said, the Middle East looked drastically different. It wasn't until the spread of Islam where, it prospered, and I don't want to say it took away, because that would be, robbing another group of people's culture away. But no, it brought a little diversity there. And, obviously it must have worked because it's still thriving today. The Middle East has a lot to offer. And you look at now, some places have embraced the modern world and are advancing, Just look at the deserts of Jordan, where he had a group called the Nabateans, which I talked earlier about in a podcast. They brought water to impossible places in the middle of the desert. They had their own irrigation systems that, rivaled the Roman irrigation systems. And they thrived. Trade, they traded all over, from Africa to India, maybe even the New World, who knows. Lastly, I want to touch on Rome. Now, we know a lot about Rome. We see it in today's films, television series, but I think they kind of get a bad rap sometimes. Yes, they were conquerors. They were very pushy, militaristic groups of people, but at certain points, if you were a Roman under a Roman occupation, or a Roman citizen, or whatever, a regular person that's in a Roman-controlled area, you became a Roman citizen. You didn't have to be from Rome. That's just how it worked. Now, this gained you opportunities. Yes, Rome owned slaves, but thanks to an emperor named Caracalla, he made every Roman province that was outside of Rome, all their citizens became Roman citizens. So I'm talking about Armenians, Africans, Greeks, Persians, Slavic, on and on. If they were in a Roman-controlled area, they could consider themselves now a part of the bigger picture. They were now Romans of, such and such descent. And could also, of course, with trials and tribulations, they could gain, positions in the Roman world and be a part of it if they, so choose. Hopefully this opens your eyes and, not just to the subjects I talked about, but just in general. I mean, here in this very country of America, we have a great history. It's rough. It's not, pretty. But just like everywhere else, you go through these hardships and you come out, on top. You hope anyway. You hope for the best. And that's all you got. You could, pray if it helps. You could, be ambitious and try to make a difference if you can. But if we don't learn about our past mistakes, then that hope just kind of goes down the drain. To quote George Santana, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And that, my friends, is where I'm going to conclude this little chit-chat. Hopefully this inspired you to maybe take the time, learn about history, maybe learn about your history. See where your ancestors came from if you care. Who knows? Maybe you might be attached to royalty. I don't know. But it's fun. But there's so much you could learn. And just, find enlightenment maybe. Who knows? Alright, everyone. I'm really going to end my chat this time with a quote from a Byzantine scholar, Procopius of Caesarea. While cleverness is appropriate to rhetoric, and inventiveness to poetry, truth alone is appropriate to history. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my little talk. Ciao.